Alrighty, let's talk about sources of Soviet conduct. Sources of Soviet conduct was a series of articles published in newspapers across the United States between the years of 1944 and 1946, written by George F. Kennan under the name of Mr. X. That was going to be his pen name, Mr. X. George F. Kennan is important because he is the Deputy Chief of Mission of the United States to the USSR. So he's working for the United States State Department in Moscow. Okay, he's working on behalf of the U.S. in Moscow, and he is a high-ranking diplomat. He is not some low-level paper pusher. He is someone who's been working high up in the embassy and really understands what's going on. Sources of Soviet conduct, or the X document, or as is also known, is going to be the basis for U.S. foreign policy throughout the Cold War, which is going to be why this particular document is so important and so critically important to understand if you want to understand why the United States is doing what they're doing when it comes to relations with the USSR. Now, in Sources of Soviet Conduct, Kennan, Mr. X, talks about a couple of different things that he believes about the USSR. And his goal is to try to relay this information back to the United States to make sure that the American public, as well as the American government, knows what's going on. A couple of different strategies behind this. Number one, especially in the United States or in any democratic country, if you want to make sure that the government does something, the best way to do that is to make sure the people who elect them are very passionate about that topic as well. If there's not a lot of people who are passionate about that topic, it's going to be much harder to make that happen. So the fact that he's publishing this to the public as well is going to really help him get this across to the federal government. Now, in this document, he talks about a number of things. First and foremost, the belief that the Soviets perceived themselves to be in a state of perpetual war with capitalism. Now, this is going to come back to one of those kind of core founding parts of the Communist Manifesto. Okay, remember in the Communist Manifesto, Marx and Engels talk about how all of history has been a struggle between the bourgeois and the proletariat, the rich and the poor and the working class. The Soviets, being followers of communism, okay, they're following this Leninist Marxist ideology, believe this as well, that the Soviets, being communist, are in a constant state of war with capitalism, and that it will be in this constant state of war with capitalism until capitalism is defeated and this communist revolution has spread all around the world. So until that happens, Kennan is saying that the USSR is going to believe that they are in a perpetual state of war, or at least their government will be believing that. Also, he says that the Soviets would use controllable Marxists in the capitalist world as allies. So if you find a Marxist group in the capitalist world and they can be controlled, you should be very, very suspicious of them, because the Soviets are probably using them to try to perpetrate and to really expand this communist revolution that they are talking about. Okay, one good example of this could be with Castro in Cuba, how the Soviets are going to be using Castro as much as they can to make sure they're getting done what they want to get done. The Soviets are going to use these controllable Marxists in the capitalist world. Now, if they're not controllable, the Soviets will not use them. We're going to see this with Tito in Yugoslavia. We're also going to be seeing this with Mao in China. Okay, there's going to be these splits between the Soviets and them, primarily because the Soviets could not control them. However, you look at a country like Poland, where the Soviets could control the Lublin Poles, and they're going to be using them to switch capitalist Poland into a Soviet satellite state. Additionally, he's going to state that Soviet aggression was not aligned with the views of the Russian people or the economic reality. So the vast majority of Russians do not agree with the Soviet aggression. They simply just want to go on living their daily lives. He's kind of trying to draw a difference between what the Soviet government is doing and what these Russian citizens are doing. And he also talks about the economic reality. Even though the Soviets might be saying that they're very strong and they're ready for war, economically speaking, they are not. This is all talk with nothing to really back it up. The Soviets are all bark and no bite. He also states that this has to do more with the historic Russian xenophobia, fear of outsiders, and that paranoia that has been prevalent within Russian politics for really a very, very long time, to an extent even up to today. And lastly, the Soviet government structure prevented objective and accurate pictures of internal and external reality. So basically, the way the Soviets set everything up, particularly with Stalin in charge, it is impossible to accurately look at their government and understand what's happening internally and externally within the Soviet Union because there's really no way of understanding exactly what's going on unless you are truly present there. And even then, it's going to be a very large challenge to understand this. Now, this is important because it's going to allow the United States to really kind of understand what the Soviets are thinking, and it's going to allow them to really form their foreign policy in a way that will help the United States and ultimately harm the USSR, which is the goal of foreign policy in this issue. In this as well, Kinnan is going to argue for the policy of containment. Now, containment is a series of different foreign policies. We're going to talk about the three big ones coming up in the next video. But containment talks about keeping communism where it is and not letting communism spread. You're going to allow communism to exist in one area, but you are not going to let it spread. The best way to talk about this is the analogy of a brain tumor, as weird as that sounds. So if you look right here, you have a brain, you've got a tumor on this brain. Now let's look at a hypothetical situation, okay? We've got right here, and this tumor is inoperable. You can't really do anything about it. So your goal as a medical provider is just to make sure that it does not spread because it's going to be okay if it's there, but don't let it spread. So what you're going to do is you're going to contain this. So in this analogy, the brain is going to be the rest of the world. The tumor is not going to be a tumor, but it's going to be communism. It's something the United States doesn't really like. They don't want to have it around, but they also realize that they can kind of coexist with communism up to a certain extent. You can still go on living your daily life as long as you don't let that tumor spread. So what they're going to do is they're going to put a ring around it, so to speak. They're going to contain it to make sure that this tumor does not spread to other parts of the brain, to make sure communism does not spread to other parts of the world. And that's really this theory of containment, just like that. Keep it where it's at, don't let it spread. Keep the tumor where it's at in the brain, don't let it spread to other parts of the brain. Keep communism where it's at, don't let it spread. Any questions, comments, put it down below. Otherwise, good luck.